expanded southwards. The often necessary military campaigns to achieve these goals were long, grueling, and deadly for all parties involved. But as the 19th century drew closer to its end, and King Menelik rose to Shawa's throne, her territorial growth, which had once been measured and restricted, exploded. Menelik's soldiers, as numerous as locusts, swiftly marched south, west, and east, and while campaigns remained long and grueling, Menelik was persistent. Now, after annexing the lands of the Arcio Romo, Menelik prepared himself for perhaps one of his most important campaigns. He was going to annex Harar. Harar, founded during the European Middle Ages, was an old walled city of about 30,000 during the late 19th century. She was home to an ethnic enclave in the traditionally Muslim Harari people, alongside some Oromo, Somalis, and, starting from Egyptian occupation, some Indians, Greeks, Syrians, and non-African peoples. Harar was crucial for multiple trade routes, both to coastal towns and settlements like Zela and Berbera, as well as inland polities and regions like the Ogaden, the land of the Gurage, and the southern provinces of the Ethiopian heartland. This trade, being carefully regulated, taxed, and controlled, was one of the city's main sources of revenue. Hence, through Harar passed ivory, animal skins, honey, cloth, saffron, and perhaps most famously, locally grown coffee, likely grown in gardens just outside the city's 5 gates. While formerly the seat of a large empire, Harar, and to varying degrees the pastoralists and agriculturalists, Oromo, and Somalis who surrounded it, were subjected to the rule of Ismail Pasha's grand, imperialistic project to the Nile's headwaters. But as Ismail's plan ended in ruin, and the modest and destroyed Egyptian control over Sudan, Egyptian power in the city slowly faded, until the last Egyptian troops garrisoned there left it to local rule in 1885. Harar's independence under Emir Abdullah would be short-lived. The revival of the Red Sea trade meant Harar's value as a link between the economies of the hinterlands and of the Red Sea now skyrocketed. Egyptian control dissipating, the city was viewed as open to conquer. Menelik had likely coveted Harar for years, and historians generally point towards her monetary and economic value as a trading city, military value due to her potential to be used for gun imports, geographic value as a jumping-off point for future campaigns, and symbolic value due to her religion and historical interactions with medieval Ethiopia as reasons for disinterest. The historian Kofi Darkwa, however, also points out that the city would have had another reason for importance. If a European power captured it, a, quote, iron ring would be formed around his kingdom of Shewa and the general empire of Ethiopia. Hence, Menelik may have felt another reason to capture Harar would be to preemptively prevent his surrounding by European powers, as he had been earlier surrounded by Egypt. Of the powers who might do this, Darkwa specifically points towards Italy and France. Whether or not this specific geopolitical interpretation is correct, the general sentiment likely is. Ethiopian kings weren't the only figures interested in the city. With the scramble in full swing, if Menelik were to take the city, he would have to act sooner rather than later. From 1884 to 1885, the Negus sent spies to the city, campaigns to suppress adjacent groups of Oromo, and letters aimed at gaining European leniency to his plan. The 1885 annexation of Massawa threatened Menelik's plans. Italy's British-endorsed annexation of the port city quickly became a point of contention for Emperor Yohannes, whom Menelik was supposed to be subservient to. Menelik's carrying on of open relations with the Italians, an increasing threat to Yohannes, may have put him in a dangerous spot. Luckily for him, Menelik wouldn't have to worry about this at the moment. The emperor was at least appeased by a British letter, diffusing conflict, even if only temporarily. Still though, I'm sure that with 2 potential timers, European expansion and Yohannes' resulting relations with Italy, Menelik now felt pressured to hurry his plans. If he did feel this way, Menelik was correct. Not even a year after the first crisis, Italian forces occupied the small settlement of Zahati, contested territory. As Menelik feared, Italy's endeavors only led to his own position being put in danger. According to historian Richard Kalk, in Yohannes' camp, Menelik was apparently accused of having instigated a Wallo-Oromo uprising. Whether or not this detail is correct, again, the sentiment likely is. Yohannes' camp didn't trust Menelik. Imperial orders mandated that he help suppress the uprising, and to resist these and risk war against Yohannes would be unwise. So Menelik ended up stuck subduing the Wallo revolt up to March, when his soldiers broke camp for Easter celebrations. About 2 months later, Menelik left for his final RC campaign. The RC campaign was long and brutal. Menelik's army suffered numerous defeats at the hands of RC night raids, skirmishes, and non-committal confrontations. Eventually, Darje, Menelik's general, camped within a katama, or military outpost, was able to crush a sizable RC army by use of gun-based tactics. After a few more months, RC territory was annexed into Shawan control. Many historians logically point out that the annexation of the RC cleared the way for Menelik to expand to Harar. About a month after Darje's September victory at Azule, Menelik called up an army and, without announcing a plan, departed from the Entoto capital with some 30 to 35,000 men. It's somewhat unclear whether or not Menelik had yet made up his mind to go to Harar, though it should also be noted that leaving for planned but unannounced campaigns was not a strategy exclusive to Menelik, and in fact was used by previous rulers of Shawa to give an element of surprise. Rumors would have flared as to where Menelik was planning to go: to Wallo, to Harar, or to bolster the campaign force of his general, Walde Gabriel. If it was the latter option, then Menelik's help was surely needed. Equipped with the best guns at his disposal. Emir Abdulahi only had 1,000 gunmen, most of whom wielded matchlocks. Horribly outgunned and outnumbered, a surprise attack was probably the Emir's best shot at defeating Menelik in open conflict. Unfortunately for the Emir, Abdulahi, Menelik was aware of this. He apparently intently watched the hillsides surrounding the camp and warned his soldiers of the potential of a Christmas feast assault. Hence, the second the Emir Abdullahi's army of some 3,000 to 4,000 appeared, Menelik's army was prepared. Now, as is common with Ethiopian battles, precise details are unavailable. I'll mostly be relying on a reconstruction from Father Anastasis Xamer d'Ethiopie and information provided by Richard Kelk in his paper The Occupation of Harar. Sadly, neither is complete in detail, meaning that I'll be trying to meld some information together. Menelik's army, though probably surprised, quickly self-organized for battle. If Father Anastas is to be believed at face value, then Abdullah Oromo, possibly goaded, moved first. According to Anastas, they charged down the hill that Abdulahi deployed his men on, and into the valley with Menelik's camp, where Menelik's men swiftly surrounded them, and where they were soon crushed. Perhaps then, after Menelik's men reformed, Abdullahi's hill was surrounded. The Shawans charged up the hill and briefly exchanged volleys with the Harari gunmen. However, the Shawans, superior in weapons and in number, would have crushed their foes. Concurrently, Menelik's Oromo cavalry neutralized the opposing Harari cannon, which had only been able to fire once. The Hararis, their army crushed, fled the battlefield. In comparison to the estimated 100 killed and 600 to 700 wounded in Menelik's army, Abdullahi lost some 1,000 killed. His force crushed, Abdullahi fled the 37 to 38 miles back to Harar. He would only have to wait a few days for Menelik's army to close the distance, and so Abdullahi again fled, this time further east into the Ogaden. Their Emir gone, a group of Harari notables and an Italian trader met with Menelik on January 9th. The city was surrendered. Menelik was quick to send notice of his annexation of Harar. The city, later placed under newly appointed Dejazmach Mekwinen with a garrison of a few thousand, would become one of the most important cities of the Ethiopian Empire. She became increasingly crucial for trade with the non-African outside world, especially the French, and would thus become an inland port of goods import and export. This extremely profitable city also served as a base for significant tax and tributary-based income for shewa, and arguably a crucial launching pad for various campaigns and raids into the Ogaden. Meanwhile, in the Shawan heartland, Queen Taitu began the process of moving the imperial capital slightly south from the Entoto Mountains to what would become Addis Ababa, or New Flower. That said, while Menelik's Shawan kingdom was economically thriving off of its expansive trade routes, tributes, and taxations, the rest of Ethiopia was probably not. Yohannes knew that Menelik was decreasingly trustworthy, especially as the balance of power between them began more and more to lean towards the Shawan. To make matters worse for the emperor, the Italians were now clearly making plays to expand into Ethiopian-held provinces, and conflict with the Mahdists was again flaring up. Yohannes was now split between three frontiers. To the south, he had to deal with Menelik. To the north, he had to deal with Italy. And to the west, he had to deal with the Mahdists.